Disclaimer: the video clips you are about to see are owned by Viz Media and Rooster Teeth. Please support the official release by buying the Blu-rays or watching on streaming services. Thank you. Hi. So today, we're going to be looking at, Rwby Volume 5. And like before, if you want context on what happens in Volumes 1 through 4, watch my other videos. Now, with Volume 5, I don't really remember if I liked it more or less than Volume 4, because it has been a while since I've seen it, so it'll be fun to watch again and see if my opinions have changed at all. And just like last time, I will look at each of their stories in chronological order, or at least one by one in where their name is, and name Team Rwby. However, little spoiler alert, in Volume 5, they do reunite, so I'm going to stop at certain points, mostly because that's when they start to reunite little by little. But before we get into the show, there actually are a few prologue character shorts that came out, and unlike last time, they're actually on the Blu-ray. So, before we get to the show, let's look at those first. The first one focuses on Weiss, and we see her fighting some Grimm that are white for some reason, and while she gets overrun by them, they do stop, showing that this was all a training session by her sister, Winter, who tells her that she isn't always going to be there to protect her. Where we then see that she's still on the cargo ship, just remembering all this. The next one follows Blake, as it constantly changes from her and Ilya talking about her backstory sometime in the past, and sometime in the present, where her and Sun are chasing after someone who supposedly might work for Adam, until Ilya intervenes and he gets away. Yeah, there really isn't much to this one. The last short is about Yang, where we see her with Rwby right before she was about to go to Beacon Academy, trying to teach her how to fight without using her scythe, but then they get attacked by a Grimm that kind of resembled a bear, but Yang is thankfully able to take it out. Then it cuts to her on her motorcycle, like where we last left her, still on her journey. So, a running theme I noticed with these shorts is showing how far they've come since before the beginning of the show, since all of them do kind of flash back to before Volume 1. Yeah, that was kind of it, really. There's not really much to these shorts, and frankly, if you're not interested, I think you can skip them. And if you never knew about them, I wouldn't blame you. But one thing I do find kind of funny is that in Volume 4, there's only one character short, that being one for Rwby. But this time, they actually made 3 more to accommodate Blake, Weiss, and Yang. I don't know, I just thought that was interesting. But with all that said, let's see what Rwby's been up to. It starts with them going through what looks like an underground passageway, where we see them arrive proper in Mistral, even though they should have already got there by dropship at the end of the last volume. But we do get to see more of the place through slightly animated JPEGs. But they make their way over to Haven Academy, but notice for a school that should be surrounded by trained warriors, it's surprisingly deserted. So they go look for the headmaster, Professor Lionheart, and they find him by accidentally scaring each other while breaking into his office thinking something is wrong. Then Crow asks why he wasn't there to greet them at the entrance and why there's no one around to guard the relic, with Lionheart shocked that he told them about it. Crow then asks again why he went radio silent for so long, and the reason he went radio silent is because when the fall of Beacon happened, it was televised, causing mass panic going around, which caused a bunch of Grimm to start attacking, causing a lot of casualties. And with one of the maidens being missing, that being the spring one, he kind of just sort of gave up. Like I said before, if you want more context, go watch my other videos. Or watch the show yourself. Rwby then asks why they need the spring maiden so badly, and apparently, aside from being able to use magic, they are the keys to the vaults that hold the relics. Winter is for creation, summer is for destruction, fall is for choice, and spring is for knowledge. Okay, so remember last time when I said we don't know which of the relics were that beacon? Well, since Cinder became the Fall Maiden and was sent there, I can deduce that it was the relic of choice. But we still don't know if Salem has it yet, though. They then ask what happened to her, and apparently the weight of responsibility caused her to run away over 10 years ago. But Crow says he has an idea on where she might be, which Lionheart is happy to hear about. But the location she might be at is a hideout to a group of bandits run by Raven. Crow shows exactly where they most likely are, and Lionheart says that in a few weeks they can get a crew together to retrieve her. But Crow really wants to go now and tells him that the people he brought with him are skilled enough for the job. But Lionheart brings up they only get one shot at this, and that's why he wants professionals. So with nothing left to do, they just kind of leave. And as they leave, we see that the entire conversation was broadcast to someone else. And as they go back to the house they're staying at, Crow says he's gonna go get a drink. And the scene where he gets his drink is literally the same as the after end credit scene from Volume 4 where Crow gives Osmond his cane back. Where we then cut to him going to the house they're staying at to drop off Crow, who is really drunk at the moment. Where he then reveals to everyone that he's actually Osmond. Also, Crow being drunk during all this is really funny to me. Then we go back to Lionheart's office, where we see the person he was leaking the information to, that being Arthur Watts, I'll just call him Dr. Watts, and they go to a hidden chamber to a Grim that can contact Salem, where we see that Cinder can now speak again, as well as them giving her the location of the Spring Maiden, with Dr. Watts being called back to make a new tale for Tyrion, proving that what Crow said about the others being skilled was true. We then cut back to the house where we see everyone having fun trying to figure out how Oscar is also Osmond, until Crow asks him to show him a trick. That he can now take control over Oscar, proving that now they both share a body both mentally and physically. He also brings up how this has happened to him before in the past, for centuries even. Yeah, apparently this is punishment by the gods for not defeating Salem. And when they ask how exactly do they defeat Salem, all he says is that right now the best thing they can do is keep the relic from her. But then they get the idea to have him just talk to Lionheart, thinking that he controls all the headmasters. But the truth is, only a handful of people even know about his ability to reincarnate. And with how Lionheart has disobeyed some of his direct instructions supposedly after he died, they think it would be best if they kept his reincarnation a secret at the moment. So with that, they now have two things left to do. One, get reinforcements that they can actually trust, which Crow actually knows a handful of. And second, they need some more training. Yes, they did make it all the way here on foot, but they still have room for improvement. Like how Rwby still can't fight without her scythe, and how Jean still hasn't actually activated his semblance. And granted, Osmond can fight in Oscar's body, but it's still technically a child's body, so it needs some work. Which he is able to pick up on rather quickly, but he still needs work. As well as Rwby when Osmond takes control and makes quick work of her. And then we get a little refresher on how aura works, like how it shields you and has slight healing properties. This will be important later. As well as how a semblance is basically a superpower. Later in the night, we see Oscar still practicing and getting really good at it, but then he asks Rwby how exactly can she keep moving forward with all this, especially with all the danger she knows is about to happen. And she replies by remembering the people who died during the fall of Beacon, and that if she died instead of them, they would have kept fighting for her. So for that, she's going to keep fighting for them. Then we cut to Crow looking for some of the huntsmen that he can trust, and everywhere he goes, all the huntsmen he looks for are either dead or supposedly missing, so he checks the database to see if he can find anything on them, but all the jobs they supposedly took happened months ago and they haven't returned yet. Okay, so I'm gonna end Ruby's part of the story early because it's around here where she starts reuniting with her old team, so let's just move on to see what Weiss has been doing. We see her right where we left off with her trying to get to Mistral, but on the way there, they pick up a distress call for help, but since this is a cargo ship, they can't really do anything despite how much Weiss wants to. But later on, they end up coming across the ship that made the call in the first place and end up being chased by Grimm that resemble wasps. So Weiss goes into the cargo bay and arms himself with dust that's being illegally transported and starts fighting them off. But after they take them out, the queen shows up and it's much more durable unlike the rest of them. So she tries launching most of the dust to blow it up, but it doesn't work. So as a last-ditch effort, she summons her at night, which does defeat the Grimm. However, the ship took too much damage from the fight and crash lands. And we see that Weiss survived the crash, but gets taken in by bandits accompanied by Raven. Later that night, she wakes up in a cage where she meets one of the bandits named Vernal, and she tells her that she's going to be ransomed back to her family. But Weiss brings up how she did plan to meet with her sister Winter when she landed, and she'll probably go look for her when she doesn't show up. But Vermeil tells her that all of General Ironwood's forces were sent back to Atlas, so she is basically on her own right now. And later in the night, she summons a smaller version of the Knight planning her escape. And later, I'm assuming the next morning, she starts putting her plan into motion. So, I'm going to stop here with Weiss because her story around here literally intertwines with someone else's, so let's just hold out until then. So, let's now go to Blake, who actually has the biggest solo story in the volume. You'll see what I mean later. Or right now. It starts off at her place with her dad and son being angry about something. Don't worry, we figure out what it is later. Where Blake goes to be alone, but then Ilya shows up asking to talk. And through this conversation, we learn that she actually took the fall for someone from getting arrested. Yeah, remember those two guys from the last volume? Yeah, they almost had them arrested until Ilya took the fall, and that's why Son and her father were angry. With Blake telling her that her actions will end up causing more harm than good in the long run. We then cut to Adam, who is being reprimanded by the leader of the White Fang for his actions involving the fall of Beacon, and for working with humans that they barely know. So he brings in his associate Hazel, who we saw in the last volume as a member of Salem's group, where he tells her that he can provide the results she wants, but she clarifies that yes, they want the Faunas to be seen as equals with humans through fear, not by starting wars. But Adam says otherwise and claims that humans should serve the Faunas and that they can win a war with Salem's help. The leader then tries to have him removed, but her guards have already sworn allegiance to Adam, and he ends up killing her and taking command by force, becoming the new leader of the White Fang. Back in Menagerie, we see Blake's father making a public announcement and telling everyone here about the White Fang's involvement during the fall of Beacon, and how Adam plans to take over the White Fang, not realizing he already did it, and bring up how his next target is going to be Haven Academy, so he proposes to everyone that they all come together to defend Haven from Adam, which they are a little iffy about. Then Blake goes to say her part in all this, until Ilya starts arguing as to why they should help the humans that enslave them. Sun does try to stop her, but she gets away. The next day, Sun and Blake go to find people willing to help save Haven from Adam, but no one really seems interested. I mean, Sun almost gets one person until his mom tells him no, so they stop for drinks, and Blake brings up how most of the people living in Menagerie moved here because of how the humans treated them, which is why they're having trouble finding support for their cause. Then she goes on to start remembering how she did used to look up to Adam before he became, well, power hungry, and is now worried that Ilya might go down the same path as he did. But she is still willing to be there for her and hopefully stop her before she does something she can't come back from. Speaking of which, we see her meeting up with some of the other members of the White Fang and gets the news that Adam is now in charge, as well as being given another job. That being to distract Blake away from her home just so a strike team can come in and assassinate her family. After she leaves, they then get a call from Adam, who pretty much just summarized everything I just told you. Then we get word that a messenger that was being sent to Haven was unfortunately taken care of. Later that night, Blake gets a message from Ilya to meet alone, and when she gets to the meeting spot, she kind of gets ambushed immediately, with Ilya more or less spilling the beans on their plan to attack her family. But thankfully, Blake wasn't stupid and actually brought Sun with her to set her free, and while running back to call her folks to hopefully warn them about what's coming, we see they're already there. But they thankfully make it back soon, and Blake goes to look for her mom in all the chaos, while her dad and son fight the two guys leading the attack. Where she then runs into Ilya, and they have a really good fight taking advantage of their abilities and surroundings. Like how Ilya turns off the lights and uses her chameleon traits to hide, and then Blake starts the fire to make it easier to see her. But after a while, she pins her down and tries telling her that there's always a better way to do this. But unfortunately for her, this is all she knows. Then her dad busts in still fighting, with Ilya breaking free from Blake, so Sun comes in to fight her. And in doing so, a piece of the house almost falls on her, but Blake's dad is able to come in and save her. And Sun does his best to hopefully lighten the load just so they can get him out of there, with one of the attackers getting caught in the rubble and dying. Then we see that her mom made it out safely, but then the last attacker still tries one final assault on them, until Ilya takes him out, showing that there is still hope for her yet. Later outside, the survivors get arrested, and a large crowd shows up with Blake telling them that all of this was not made by humans, but Faunus, proving that they're just as capable of hate as humans are, and that this is what Adam wants. So she asks one more time for help, and the first person to volunteer is actually Ilya. But a guard wants to arrest her for her crimes, but Blake shows her forgiveness. And this ends up inspiring everyone to volunteer to help stop the White Fang from destroying Haven. So now that they have the resistance, they now spend the next 2 weeks preparing for the attack on Haven, ending Blake's part in the volume. So, yeah, Blake definitely had a lot more to do in this volume, and I gotta say, as a standalone story with a beginning, middle, and end, which doesn't really intertwine with the others until the very end, I actually thought it was pretty good. Now with that, let's see what Yang's been doing. And afterward, let's start seeing everyone reunite. We first see her at a gas station convenience store stopping for a drink, when someone starts hitting on her, and when he pushes his boundaries, she punches him out of there. And after she finishes her drink and continues her search for Raven, the guy she just punched overhears that she's looking for Raven and offers to give her directions. After some driving, the guy asks her to stop just so he can make sure the coast is clear and that they can still proceed, but she already knows the trap and is willing to put up with it just to get closer to Raven. And later on, he does come back with bandits to get revenge on Yang for punching him, as well as accidentally blabbing the exact direction their home base is, giving her the last piece of info she needs to find Raven. But before she goes, she beats them all up and even uses some of her dad's advice on them. Afterwards, she does finally make it to the bandits' hideout, and she ends up finally meeting up with Raven, who thinks Yang is there to join up with her, but that's not the case. She's still looking for Rwby, and yeah, she knows she's going to Mistral, but she doesn't know if she's there yet, so she wants to use Raven's semblance to make finding her easy. And her semblance is, once again, to make wormholes. But we also learn that she can make direct wormholes to people she's close to, like Crow, for instance, who did promise Yang that he'd look after Rwby, which is why she came here instead of just going directly to Mistral. But Raven says no, and that whatever Crow and Rwby have gotten themselves into will be a bit much for her to handle. And also giving a hint that she might already know about Osmond returning by saying that he can't be trusted. But Yang isn't backing down, and when one of them tries to make her leave, she punches him and ends up finding Weiss imprisoned here. And now, with her subtle escape plan more or less ruined, she makes her Ice Knight bigger, and her and Yang start fighting the rest of the bandits, with Yang quickly getting her up to speed on why she's here. But then out of nowhere, a bolt of lightning strikes, causing everyone to stop, as well as Raven telling her assistant Vernal to give Weiss her sword back, as well as telling them both to get into her tent to explain some things. But before that, Weiss hugs Yang, just telling her how much she missed her. And when they do finally meet up with Raven, She starts telling them a story about how her and Crow did enter Beacon Academy like they did, but not to become huntsmen, but how to kill one. And over time, Osmond did recognize their skills and regularly gave them secret missions, and ended up turning a blind eye to some of their bad attitudes or behaviors at the Academy, just so they would trust him. Granted, he did share some of his secrets with them. However, Raven wanted to know more, and the more she learned about him, the more she less began to trust him, as well as beginning to fear what they were fighting against. Yang asks what it is, and she tells them all about Salem and how she can't really be killed. With Yang asking why they should trust any of this, and Raven says that it's good for Yang to actually ask questions, unlike Crow and her dad, which makes her angry and tells Raven that she was never there for her. But she says that she has seen a lot of dangerous things, and even telling them that magic is real, and that she can prove it. Yeah, apparently Osmond did something to her and Crow, which was giving them the ability to transform into birds. Yeah, so Raven describes this as some sort of horrible evil catastrophe committed by Osmond, but it's not like they're stuck as birds. They can go back and forth whenever they want, and yeah, it was never a problem. Like, it's not like they're given bird features to where they're mistaken for faunas, and the closest I could think of to when it was a problem was in one Rwby chibi short where, yeah, the transformation didn't go right and Osmond didn't really do anything to help, but that was a comedy skit made for laughs, not something important to the story, so I don't know. Raven's just being way too overdramatic about all this. When they obviously ask how any of this is possible, she ends up making a portal giving them a choice. Either stay here and learn everything without any filters, or go join Osmond's unwinnable war. Yeah, Yang only cares about being there for Rwby, so she makes her way over to Mistral, with Weiss of course. Okay, so now I'm just gonna start telling the story as is because this is where they start to come back together. For the most part. We first see Crow trying to figure out how all the contacts he was looking for can all just be gone, until the portal shows up that he thinks is Raven. Then we cut to the kitchen when we see the rest of them cooking a feast for all the huntsmen they think Crow is gonna bring, until he calls Rwby into the living room and shows them who just showed up. That, of course, being Weiss and Yang. And the first thing Rwby does upon seeing Yang is just try to apologize for the fact that she just up and left without talking to her about it, but instead she just hugs her. And with how much effort we saw her go through just to meet up with her again, can you really expect her to be that mad? They even let Weiss join in on this, even though she just had a moment with Yang not even an hour ago. Then we see them all having a feast, reminiscing about what they were all doing during Volume 4, and it's nice to see them just having fun again after all that has been happening recently. Especially with Rem telling everyone how much they've grown since involuntarily leaving Beacon. Then Crow brings everyone back to the living room, where we cut to later, and we can guess that Weiss and Yang are brought up to speed on the whole Four Maidens and how Osmond was reincarnated into Oscar. Then Osmond asks if this all matches up with what Raven told them. Yang does say yes, except he didn't mention anything about how Crow and Raven can turn into birds. Yeah, once again, how is this a bad thing? He then tells them that, just like the maidens, he himself also has magic powers, and that's what he used to give Crow and Raven their ability to turn into birds, which the rest of them find hard to believe, and frankly that's the most reasonable reaction to all of this, with Weiss saying that it's all true and that they did see Raven do it. Osmond says that he did this because it made getting intel much easier when it came to finding who the next maidens were, and currently his magic power is dwindling and that he used most of it to create the maidens a really, really long time ago. After this info dump, Osmond says that if this all seems like too much for them to handle, they can leave and he won't fault them for it. And so far nobody wants to leave. However, Yang says that if Rwby's staying, she's staying, only on the condition that Osmond stops keeping secrets from them, which he thankfully agrees to. Then John asks what are they going to do now, with Osmond saying they can relax tonight and resume figuring things out tomorrow. Then we cut back to Raven's hideout, where we see that some of Salem's minions showing up, demanding to speak with Raven. Where we then cut back to the house, where we see Rwby just hanging out when Yang shows up, with Weiss not falling far behind with some coffee. And we just kind of see them hanging out until Rwby brings up Blake, with Yang showing that she's still mad at her for just abandoning them after the fall of Beacon. When they ask her to calm down, she gets more frustrated and goes off to cool down for a bit, where we see her looking at a photo of them still together, until Weiss comes in, and before she can say anything, Yang says she doesn't want to talk right now, leading to her talking about how she kind of has abandonment issues, and this mostly has to do with the fact that her mom left at a young age, Ruby's mom is dead, and their dad was kind of working a lot when they were young. And she kind of thinks that Weiss doesn't really have to deal with any of this with her family. But she speaks up and brings up how her family is also a giant mess, which we already know from the last volume. And then she goes on to say how Team Rwby feels more like a family to her than her actual one, not counting Winter. And then she brings up that when Blake comes back, she will be there for her, kind of like how she's being here for Yang right now. Then Rwby comes in asking if everything's okay, and Yang thankfully says yes. Then we get to Raven, who finds out that Salem's minions have discovered her, so she goes to speak with them, and through this conversation, we find out that the main reason they're here is to see if it's true that she does have the Spring Maiden, which she does, and it turns out to be her assistant Vernal, which she ends up proving by messing with the weather. Now with this confirmed, Cinder tells them that Salem only wants the maidens at this point just for their ability to help get the relics. And if they help get the relic that's in Haven right now, Salem will leave them alone. But Raven wants something in return for their help. Yeah, apparently she wants her brother killed, mostly because he knows too much about where to find her, and she doesn't want him telling anyone else, kind of like how he did with Yang and Lionheart. And since he is already in Haven, they can technically both get what they want in the end. But Dr. Watts starts telling them some of the ways this can go wrong, but through some talking, they do eventually agree to go through with her terms. Then later on, when she's alone with Vernal, they pretty much know they're going to get betrayed in the end, so afterwards they plan to take the relic for themselves. Then she turns into a bird and flies to Haven, where we then see Crow just sitting by himself until Oscar comes in telling him that Osmond wants a word, where they pretty much talk about how the odds are not really in their favor at the moment. But then Rwby comes in and tells them that they have been thinking, and since Cinder was one of the maidens sent to Beacon Academy, did she by any chance get the relic there? But thankfully Osmond tells her that that relic was kept much better hidden than the rest, so she probably doesn't have it at the moment. Okay, good, because like I said before, it had been a while since I've seen this volume. But then again, like in the actual dialogue I forgot to mention, he said she probably doesn't have it, so there's a chance she could have acquired it, they just haven't shown it to us yet. But then Rwby asks one more question. Is this cane secretly a relic? He tells her no, but it's special to him and that it does have a few tricks, which I don't remember if we even see later. Then Crow gets a call from Lionheart saying that he has a plan to get the Spring Maiden, and asks to meet tomorrow night to discuss it. With Osmond pointing out how this is kind of suspicious, especially given how his last meeting with Lionheart went. Speaking of which, we see him talking to Raven, where she asks him why exactly is he betraying Osmond, and the reason being is that he's incredibly scared of Salem, which is why he thinks Raven is doing what she's doing right now. We then cut to later at the meeting time that Lionheart set, and when they arrive, he notices that they all brought their weapons, as Yang notices her mother was Crow trying to shoot her. But afterwards, he tries asking her for the Spring Maiden again, and once again she says no, and opens a portal bringing in reinforcements. as well as Hazel coming in, letting them know that the White Fang is here to set up explosives to blow the place up if anyone tries to leave or enter. And Cinder also kind of tells everyone how Lionheart has been the one leaking information to Salem for years at this point. Then everything kind of spirals into one big massive battle, and I think giving a play-by-play on everything that happens will take forever, so I'll try to summarize the important parts as best I can. The first notable thing is when Oscar goes to fight Lionheart, he sees Osmond's cane and he pieces together that he's been reincarnated. And the first thing he thinks to do is to turn him into Salem, mostly to hopefully get out of the mess he put himself in. Then during Weiss's fight with Vernal, she almost gets mortally wounded, with Cinder mocking Jean by asking if he's going to let another one of his friends die again. And right as she comes close to killing him, Rwby activates her silver eyes again, wounding Cinder just long enough for Jean to almost land a final blow on her. So, out of annoyance from him, she stabs Weiss for real this time. And it's around this part where Lionheart tells Hazel about Osmond being back again, which causes him to stab himself with dust crystals to make himself strong enough to potentially kill him again. With Lionheart also opening the vault to the relic, with Raven, Cinder, and Vernal going in. Then we end up learning why Hazel hates Osmond so much and wants him dead even though he's just gonna come back again. So apparently he had a sister that went to Beacon, and during a mission she died and has since blamed Osmond for it. Then we see John and Rem trying to mend Weiss's injuries, when all of a sudden her aura starts healing her. Yeah, so John finally finds out what his semblance is, and it's to share aura, which is what's healing Weiss right now. Then we cut down to the vault, where Vernal is about to open it, but then Cinder freezes Raven in ice and ends up grabbing Vernal with a new hand, which is apparently made from Grimm to suck out the power of the Spring Maiden. But unfortunately, she doesn't find any power inside of her at all, and right as Raven breaks free from the ice, we learn that she was actually the Spring Maiden this whole time. So, yeah, the Spring Maiden did actually reach Raven. And we do learn later that she did have to kill her to take her powers, but we do know the only way for the power to be transferred is to, 1, die, obviously, and 2, the power goes to whoever was in the final thoughts of the current maiden, and, not gonna lie, this was a really cool twist. Then we cut back to the lobby, where we see more fighting happening, as well as Nora smashing Hazel outside, where he tells the White Fang to keep going with the plan, but then we see Blake finally made it to Haven, and she even brought with her her resistance that she started back in Menagerie, as well as the police. So in retaliation, Adam decides to detonate the explosives, but we see that Ilya already disarmed them a while ago. With nothing left, he tries attacking Blake and ends up failing pretty bad, leading to a massive firefight between the White Fang and the Resistance. Then Weiss ends up summoning an ice wasp, showing that she can now fight again, but then notices Blake. Yeah, Team Rwby is now finally back together. But then Yang sees an opening into the vault and goes in to stop Cinder and her mom, with everybody backing her up and Blake more or less running back outside to continue her fight. Then we cut back to the vault where we see Raven and Cinder fighting, and I'm not gonna lie, this fight is honestly the highlight of Volume 5 for me, especially with them using fire and lightning. Okay, one thing about the Maidens is that the powers they had were never really fully defined, because we mostly see Cinder using fire, we're going to see Raven use lightning, but earlier we did see Cinder use ice. But then we see Raven also use ice, showing that they do have more than one element. Part of me wishes this was explained more, but frankly this fight kicks ass, so I'll just let it play out. Then we see Vernal with her last breath shoot Cinder, giving Raven an opening to blast her off the edge, and freezing her so she can't save herself for good measure. And with that, Vernal finally dies, and Raven goes to open the vault. And right as she does, Yang shows up finally. Then we cut back outside, where we see that the White Fang is finally defeated. And as for Adam, he runs away, with Blake now free to go help her friends. Back at the vault, Yang and Raven start arguing about who was in the wrong in all this, with Raven saying that Yang is still technically just a child who just jumped inside of a war. Then Yang points out that aside from her having maiden powers, her having a relic will also put a large target on her back, with Salem to most likely do everything in her power to find her. And with Yang showing no signs of backing down, Raven lets her have the relic, as well as saying sorry before leaving. And we finally get a good look at the relic, and it appears to be some sort of lantern, but thankfully when Yang goes to get it, there's like no resistance, so thankfully you don't have to be a maiden to physically touch it. Then we cut to Lionheart trying to run away, when all of a sudden the Grim that Salem was using to keep tabs with him shows up, where he then tries to plead for his life, but Salem isn't having it and has him killed. Then we come back to what I think is the lobby to this place. They never really said what this room was. Where Yang comes in with the relic, and with the fight won for the good guys, Emerald makes an illusion of Salem, scaring everyone just long enough for them to escape. Then the volume comes to a nice but abrupt end where all of Team Rwby finally gets back together officially, and Osmond telling Crow that they need to get the lantern to Atlas, where it just abruptly cuts to black. So that was Rwby Volume 5, and I gotta say, I actually really liked it, because remember last time, I felt like Volume 4 was mostly build-up, and Volume 5 felt like the payoff, and a pretty good payoff too, because the last time one of their schools was attacked, they failed. Beacon fell. But this time, they did save Haven, and they got the relic, so it's nice seeing things look up for the heroes. So with that, let's come back next time where we look at Rwby Volume 6. The last volume I'm going to be looking at this year, and I hope to see his end.